Has anyone ever told you that you were dead while you were still breathing? I heard that from the very people who gave me life, not through direct words but through absolute silence, cold steel stares, and the sound of someone else's name being called in place of mine. When my parents decided to erase me from their lives, they didn't need actual death to do it. All it took was for me to disobey. And I did. My name is Ellie Morgan, 24 years old, a summa cum laude graduate in business administration from UCLA, full of ambition and determined to modernize Morgan Freight, a century-old maritime shipping company run by my family for 4 generations in Charleston, South Carolina. But to my parents, Robert and Vivian Morgan, modernization was a threat. To them, tradition was sacred. And I, their only daughter, was born to carry it on, their way. It all started on a March evening when I was summoned to the formal dining room. A room only used to host important guests or discuss major decisions. The 12-seat walnut table held only 3 people: my father, my mother, and a stranger in his mid-30s dressed in a black suit and polished shoes. Daniel Fletcher, the son of the CEO of our biggest rival, Fletcher Lines. I had heard of him, but never imagined I'd be seated at the same table. My mother smiled and poured me a glass of wine I didn't ask for. My father stood, sliding a thick stack of papers toward me. "This is a marriage contract. You'll marry Daniel in June. It's a necessary move to secure the future of Morgan Freight." I laughed. At the time I thought they were testing me, a poorly timed joke, but their expressions held not a trace of humor. Daniel sat there, smirking like he was being handed property, not a person. "Dad, this is 2025, not the 19th century. I'm not some asset to be traded for a business alliance." "Silence," my father's voice thundered. "You will not disgrace the Morgan name. Generations built this empire, and you're ready to throw it away for some cheap ideals you picked up in college?" I felt the wineglass trembling in my hand, but I didn't back down, not this time. "I'm not rejecting the family, I'm rejecting the life you're forcing me to live. If you walk out that door without signing, don't ever come back." My mother's voice was void of emotion, as if I was never the little girl she once held each night. I stood, pushed the glass aside. "As I don't need a legacy that costs me my identity." That night, I didn't slam the door. I simply walked away from the mansion that had caged my youth like a gilded prison. I drove to the bank and withdrew every last dollar left in my trust fund. $42,800. They thought they controlled, but forgot about a small supplemental grant from my great-grandmother's scholarship fund. No note, no tears, just a suitcase, a laptop, and sheer determination. I rented a tiny room in a rundown inn in Savannah, Georgia, over 100 miles from home. I cut my hair, deleted social media accounts, changed my number, and even altered how I introduced myself. Ellie Morgan, the heiress of a prestigious shipping dynasty, was gone. In that peeling painted room with a creaky ceiling fan that ran all night, I started from scratch. I dove into online courses, learned about supply chain tech, AI in logistics, and blockchain in maritime operations. Within 3 months, I sketched out the foundation for a new company, Onyx Logistics. An intelligent logistics platform that integrated real-time data. Every line of code was typed by me, night after night while the world slept. I didn't allow myself to cry. I wasn't allowed to break. If I did, the death my parents imposed would become reality. 6 months later, I stumbled upon an article in a trade magazine, remembering Ellie Morgan, brilliant young woman lost in boating tragedy. There was even a funeral photo. A black and white portrait of me, framed by white flowers and rows of mourners in black, including Daniel Fletcher, who was never anything to me. That's how they chose to handle my disappearance, by faking my death. They held a funeral, shed tears, accepted sympathy, all to avoid admitting their daughter walked away on her own terms. I had died. At least in their eyes. But I was still alive. And I swore I'd live in a way they'd never see coming. I didn't think I'd cry seeing my own funeral, but when I saw my face in that black and white frame, something shattered. They hadn't just cut me off. They erased me from the world. According to the report, Ellie Morgan, only daughter of the Morgan family, had perished in a boating accident off the coast of Charleston. Her body was never recovered. A funeral was held on the family estate, attended by close friends and family. In the photo, my mother wore a black dress, her eyes downcast, hand over her chest as if mourning a priceless treasure. My father stood beside her, face stern, eyes distant. I laughed. There were no real tears from me. What they mourned was the image of the perfect daughter they had molded to be a business pawn. They couldn't handle the truth that Ellie Morgan had chosen her own path. So, they created a fake death. An empty casket. A fabricated tragedy. And a blatant lie swallowed with wine and pastries at the memorial. I died, but not at sea. I died in my mother's disappointed stare, in my father's rage-filled roar. But from that death, someone else was born. I needed a new identity, one distant enough to stay hidden, close enough to watch them when the time came. After many sleepless nights, I chose the name Eden Blair. Not glamorous, not obvious, but symbolic. Eden, a beginning. Blair, an ordinary American name. I built Eden from nothing. I hired a professional to create a convincing identity. Born in Colorado, raised in Arizona, online degree in supply chain tech. I created new emails, bank accounts, a passport. I was no longer Ellie Morgan. And I was no longer a victim. In my first year, I took every freelance job I could, designing logistics systems for mom-and-pop stores, streamlining delivery processes for local startups, even helping retail chains sync their inventory. No job was glamorous, but each one laid a brick in the foundation I was quietly building. I didn't need fame. I needed to understand how the real world ran. The world Morgan Freight never let me see. I slept 4 hours a day, survived on coffee and instant noodles, and funneled every dollar into advanced courses. I learned ERP systems, big data and logistics, and most importantly how to topple an old empire from the inside. No guns, just cash flow. 2 years later, I wasn't the girl coding in a cheap motel room anymore. I was Eden Blair, CEO of Kavira Logistics. A young company, razor-sharp in supply chain optimization. We didn't own ships, but we had the tech to manage every delivery second by second. I used digital networks to invest in small ports, abandoned warehouses, and dying local delivery services. I bought low, revamped, and multiplied their value tenfold. I didn't need a PR team or a young entrepreneur award. I just needed a strong enough network to haunt Morgan Freight, without them knowing who was pulling the strings. 3 years after the day I died, I officially became the force behind Veritas Group, an investment syndicate Forbes dubbed the silent beast of the logistics industry. No one knew Eden Blair. No one knew Veritas Group belonged to me. And absolutely no one knew that the CEO of Veritas had just acquired a major stake in Morgan Freight. I remember the day I received the official investment confirmation from Morgan Freight's board of directors. They were ecstatic, as if they'd found a savior in the middle of a financial storm. A foreign, anonymous corporation, agreeing to invest and rescue the company from bankruptcy after a string of failures, caused by their refusal to modernize. If they had known that their savior was the daughter they once held a fake funeral for, would they still have signed? I doubt it. But I didn't care. That night, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse in Midtown Atlanta, staring out at the glittering skyline. Cold wind swept through my short hair. I took a sip of red wine, tasting the sharp bitterness on my tongue. I was back. But not for forgiveness. Not to cry or ask why. I came back to take everything. Every stolen second of my youth, every time they belittled me, every insult I had to swallow like poison. And I wouldn't stop until they looked at me, not with pity, but with fear. They say the best revenge is living well. I agree. But to me, living well isn't enough. I want them to live in a world I built. A world powered by the hands of the dead daughter. Step by step. Breath by breath. I would be the wind they couldn't see but always felt. 3 years after Kivira Logistics turned profitable, I branched out. A division with a special purpose. To take down Morgan Freight from the shadows. I named it Aurelius Maritime. A name that carried no family ties, but just enough elegance to attract big investors. Ariella didn't buy ships. We leased operational rights from private ports, invested in AI-driven container coordination, and used blockchain for a fully transparent system, something old guard companies like Morgan Freight would never dare touch. We started with small shipping routes in Florida, then expanded along the East Coast, slipping into ports my father once called Morgan's backyard. We didn't attack head-on. We choked the supply, slowly. At the same time, I launched Lunaris Holdings, a luxury real estate firm focused on acquiring struggling hotels, resorts, and vacation properties. Under the guise of financial restructuring, Lunaris quietly took over several hotel chains where my family used to hold conferences, weddings, and annual getaways. One of the first trophies was the Granville, the hotel where my parents had celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. They had no idea that the glamorous party that night took place in my hotel, with every expense flowing straight into Lunaris Holdings accounts. Every time they booked a room, I noted it. Every time they chose a new shipping partner, I investigated. Every familiar name in Morgan Freight's supplier list, from container vendors to maritime insurers, was gradually acquired or influenced. I wasn't in a rush. I wanted them to live in the illusion of control, until the moment they realized everything had changed hands without them knowing. At 28, Aurelius Maritime officially entered the top 5 fastest-growing shipping companies in the southeastern United States. That's when I made my most important decision: to rebrand the company. Aurelius had served its purpose as a beginning, but for the end, I needed something stronger. Something that could burn the rot and rebuild from ashes. I named it Helix Maritime. Helix symbolized rebirth, a never-ending spiral, rising, evolving, transforming. We launched our first digital campaign, increased delivery speeds by 38%, reduced middleman costs by 17%, and offered 6 months of free services to clients who left traditional carriers, including Morgan Freight. Within 4 months, we secured 11 core partners that once kept Morgan alive. Their revenue plummeted. Internal meetings spiraled into chaos. And while they blamed the market, I knew the truth. The market had changed. Because I changed it. I still remember a late fall evening when I received a forwarded email from Helix's finance assistant. Subject: Morgan Freight is reviewing a partnership proposal from Helix Maritime. I didn't laugh. I sat in silence. My father, the man who once declared I wouldn't survive without the Morgan name, was now reaching out to a company I built, under a name he had never heard. I had reached my first milestone. But I wasn't done. I returned to Charleston, not as Ellie Morgan, but as Eden Blair, owner of Helix Maritime and Lunaris Holdings. With dark brown hair, cold eyes and expensive leather boots instead of the flats worn by the obedient daughter they once knew. I booked a room at the Ashcroft, my mother's favorite hotel, where she used to host spring charity galas. It had changed ownership too. Yes, it belonged to me now. I stood on the 15th floor balcony, wine in hand, looking down at the harbor. Once dominated by Morgan Freight. Now, 3 out of 5 ports there had exclusive contracts with Helix. I didn't need to show up at their doorstep. Not yet. Everything I wanted was already in place. And they, those who once thought they were untouchable, were now living in a beautiful lie, where every inch of land and every dollar they moved belonged to me. One evening, while reviewing financial reports, Maya, my personal assistant, walked in, face lit with excitement. "Ellie, Morgan Freight just got flagged by the bank. They're mortgaging the main estate to maintain working capital." I looked at her, unblinking. "Begin the acquisition plan, make sure it's through a third-tier shell. They can't suspect a thing." Maya nodded. "Do you want to keep the old mansion?" I set my pen down, leaned back in my chair. "Yes. I want it. For living." I smiled coldly, and the room seemed to drop in temperature. No. I want them to pay rent. If anything is crueler than death, it's watching people grieve your death while you're still alive. More successful than ever. I sat in a corner of the ballroom, wine glass in hand, black mermaid dress hugging my figure, a silver mask covering half my face. A nameless VIP guest at my sister Emma Morgan's extravagant wedding, hosted at Langford Hall, recently revived by Lunaris Holdings from near ruin. No one in the crowd recognized me. Not a single person. Of course not. Ellie Morgan died 6 years ago. Now, I am Eden Blair, the mysterious investor who dropped $2.3 million to sponsor the entire Morgan wedding, through 3 layers of intermediaries, of course. This wedding was my gift to myself. I didn't come to destroy. I came to witness, to see, with my own eyes, the people who erased me from their lives. Play pretend. Emma, now 23, looked like she had stepped out of a bridal magazine. A white lace gown adorned with pearls, soft curls cascading around her face, and a perfectly rehearsed innocent smile. Beside her stood her husband, Ethan Parker, son of a local politician, and Morgan Freight's latest desperate attempt at revival through a new business alliance. My parents, Robert and Vivian, sat in the guest of honor seats, exuding an air of authority like they still ran all of Charleston. I could clearly see the pride in my father's eyes, the satisfied nod he gave as he stood to speak, his voice echoing through the hall. Today I'm not only giving my daughter to the best man but also remembering the child our family once lost. The room fell silent. My father raised his glass. My mother lowered her head, clutching her embroidered handkerchief. Ellie Morgan, my eldest daughter, left us years ago in a tragic boating accident. She was a light, a beacon of hope. And today, that light still shines, if only in our memories. Hypocrites. I clenched the glass in my hand, my throat tightening with bitterness. No one in this chandelier-lit room knew that the person they were mourning was sitting less than 30 feet away. They had no idea I was the one who selected the white satin chairs, the floral arrangements, even the champagne they were sipping, Dom Perignon Vintage 2013. Because I knew my mother always sneered at anything she didn't deem refined enough. Every detail of this wedding had my approval. They were living in a world I had built, still believing they were at the center of it. Emma took the stage, microphone in hand, her voice trembling. Today, beyond the happiness of marrying Ethan, I want to say something about someone special. Ellie. My sister isn't here, but I know she's watching me from somewhere. She once told me, "Never let anyone decide your dream for you." I nearly laughed. This same girl was 17 when she called me selfish for refusing to marry Daniel Fletcher. She chose silence. She chose our parents' side. And now, she stood here, playing the part of the loving sister? Of course. Weddings, the one place where all lies are forgiven with a pretty dress and a tiered cake. I dipped my head slightly, hiding a sigh behind my silver mask. As dinner was being served, a young waiter approached my table and bowed politely. "Miss Blair, Mr. Bennett from Morgan Freight requests a moment of your time. He's currently the acting CEO." I nodded, stood slowly, and walked toward the quiet lounge area. Frank Bennett, once the deputy director when I still lived under the Morgan roof, looked like he'd aged a decade. He stood abruptly upon seeing me. "Ms. Blair, it's truly an honor to meet the woman who generously sponsored this important event. The Morgan family is incredibly grateful for your support." I smiled and extended my hand. I have a soft spot for traditional families, especially those that know how to rise after a fall. Frank chuckled awkwardly, unable to meet my gaze. "Actually, I was hoping to ask, will your company Helix Maritime be expanding into South Carolina? We've been struggling with our supply chain network." I raised my glass, eyes unblinking. "Mr. Bennett, someone from my team will contact you next week, but please note, Helix only partners with those who can adapt. Those clinging to the past, well, I'm afraid they're not a fit." He nodded repeatedly, like a bobbing bird. As I turned to leave, I could feel it. That flicker of suspicion in his stare. Faint. But real. I returned to the ballroom just as my mother began to show signs of tipsiness. She raised her glass again and wobbled onto the stage, microphone in hand, her voice slurred. "I want to thank you all. And especially, Miss Eden Blair, the woman who made this wedding possible. A woman who's independent, bold, nothing like Ellie, that daughter who thought she could live without family." I saw my father tug at her sleeve, but she brushed him off. Ellie never understood. Legacy. Tradition. Family name. That's everything. And what happened? She vanished. As if she never existed. She laughed. A sharp, blade-like laugh that cut across the room. I stood up. The whole hall went still. I walked slowly into the warm light, locking eyes with my mother's drunken gaze. I tilted my head, voice calm and icy. "So, if Ellie heard you say that, what do you think she'd feel?" Silence. My mother blinked, her eyes darkened. Then she murmured, Your voice." I smiled. Said nothing. That day I walked into Morgan Freight's headquarters for the first time in 6 years. A fortress my father once considered untouchable, now a hollow shell, wrapped in a polished facade. Inside, the air was thick with panic. Employees whispered as I passed. Their eyes filled with both fear and curiosity. I wore a deep crimson suit, color of blood, of resolve, and sharp heels that echoed with each step on the marble floor. Around my neck, a compass pendant, the last thing my grandmother gave me, the only one in the family who ever saw me as a real person. At the front desk, a young receptionist blinked in confusion as I handed over my folder. "My name is Eden Blair, Morgan Freight's new controlling shareholder. I'm here for the board meeting." The receptionist stammered. I'm sorry, but your name isn't on the list." I cut her off, placing a thick envelope gently on the counter. "Ownership verification, 61% stake, through 3 parent companies. I think you should call your supervisor." Less than 5 minutes later, Thomas Bell, the company's attorney, showed up, pale as if he'd seen a ghost. Ms. Blair, please come up to the 12th floor, the board is expecting you." The board wasn't expecting me. They had no idea I was coming. The meeting room doors swung open, slicing through the heated debate inside. I stepped in like a silent storm. Every head turned. 12 men in gray suits, 2 women seated quietly. At the head of the table stood Robert Morgan. My father. Mid-speech about an emergency restructuring to save the soul of Morgan Freight. I walked straight to the empty chair near him, pulled a folder from my coat, and placed it on the table like a warning shot. "Sorry to interrupt, but I think you'll want to see these documents." My father frowned. "Who are you?" I looked him dead in the eyes. My voice was calm. "The one you declared dead. The one you erased from every report, every legacy. The one you forced to disappear because she dared to say no." Silence shattered into a storm of murmurs. One board member flipped through the documents, eyes wide. She owns all our East Coast subsidiaries, and Helix Maritime. My God, she controls 64% of our operating assets." My father's face drained of color. "That's impossible." I nodded, offering a cold smile. "You should have remembered. I learned from the best, including you. The difference is, I learned how to destroy everything you thought was untouchable." "You think you can buy power with money?" he growled. "No, father," I replied, eyes steady. "I didn't buy power. I reclaimed what you stole." I removed my sunglasses, gently pulled off the last layer of political disguise, revealing my real face. No longer little Ellie. The woman he once declared dead. A CFO whispered. "My God. Ellie Morgan." "Wrong," I said clearly. "Ellie Morgan is gone. The woman standing before you is Eden Blair, who will redefine everything Morgan Freight thought it stood for." The truth shattered like glass. Some collapsed into their seats, others whispered into their phones. And my father, the man who believed the Morgan name could control the world, stood frozen. Like a king being dragged down by the ghost of his past. I stood tall, voice as sharp as steel. I'm not here to make peace. I'm here to save this company from the pride you injected into its bloodstream. I'm not asking for my place back. I'm taking back my voice. The one you stripped in the name of family tradition. My father took a step toward me, but I raised a hand. One more step and you lose what's left. The entire room held its breath. You have 24 hours to sign the merger agreement transferring Morgan Freight into Helix Maritime. If not, I will begin foreclosure proceedings and liquidate every asset including the mansion you currently live in, where you hosted my fake funeral. I turned to leave, but just before the door closed, I looked back. One last thing. You don't get to destroy me, not with any number of obituaries. All you did was create a stronger version of me. And this time, I don't need the Morgan name to survive. My heels echoed through the halls of headquarters. Some employees stepped aside, lowering their heads, whether in respect or fear. I didn't care. Maya was waiting at the elevator, handing me a breaking headline from Bloomberg. Mysterious investor, Eden Blair revealed as deceased, heiress Ellie Morgan, now in control of Morgan Freight. I glanced at it and handed it back. Schedule the press conference. I'll be the one telling the rest of the story. That night, Charleston lit up earlier than usual. Golden streaks of light stretched across its historic streets, glimmering off the water as if trying to soothe the financial storm just unleashed on the city. On the top floor of Langford Hall Hotel, I sat across from Robert and Vivian Morgan, my biological parents, in a small, elegant but strangely cold conference room. Between us sat a thick file, the agreement to merge Morgan Freight into Helix Maritime. My father remained rigid, back straight, shoulders tense, eyes frozen. But this time, there was no boardroom for him to pound his fists on, no subordinates left to manipulate. I had taken all that away. And my mother, she sat with her hands clasped tightly, red painted nails digging into pale skin. She was the first to break the silence. Ellie? Her voice trembled. Could you take off that mask? I'm sorry. I just want to see you once. Really see you. It hurt too much, all of it. Honest and angry. It hurt too much, all of it. It hurt. I didn't move. I wasn't wearing a mask anymore. I had taken it off that morning, in the boardroom. But I knew what she meant. The 6-year chasm built with rejections, a fake funeral, and deliberate coldness. That now she hoped to erase with a few tears. Aren't I standing right in front of you? I asked, eyes locked on hers. Or is it the other girl you want to see, the obedient one, the one who bowed to every decision that wasn't hers to make? My mother raised a hand to cover her mouth, an old reflex whenever she faced something she couldn't control. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough! You think all of this show is for what? What are you trying to prove? To humiliate me? I looked at him, unblinking. No, father. I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I did what I had to do to survive. And once I survived, I chose to come back and reclaim everything. He laughed, a dry, twisted, bitter laugh. You are the daughter I once loved. I placed the future of Morgan Freight in your hands. Until you betrayed everything we built. I tilted my head slightly. You're wrong. I didn't betray tradition. I just refused to drown in it. I pulled out another document, already signed, and laid it gently on the table. The name Morgan Freight will remain. I don't need to destroy a legacy. I just need it to survive. Without you at the helm. My father's eyes widened. My mother began to cry, tears streaking down her smudged makeup. Ellie, can you forgive me? I didn't know it would come to this. I assumed. You didn't think at all, I cut in, my voice sharp as a blade. You were silent. And that silence is what killed me the first time. I stood up, lifting the sleek leather handbag beside me. You have 24 hours. If the merger isn't signed, I will call in every loan, foreclose on every port, every container, every property. And I have the legal authority to do it. My mother trembled, grabbing the sleeve of my blazer as I turned to go. Please, you can't treat your parents like enemies. I stopped, but didn't turn. I don't see you as enemies. But I will never be your prey again. I slipped my arm free from her grip. Her softness felt like vines. Hesitate for even a moment, and they'd drag me back into the same pit I once barely escaped. When I walked out of the room, Maya was already waiting in the hallway. What did they say? She asked quietly. They have 23 hours left, I replied. She handed me a phone. On the screen, an explosion of headlines from the press, investors, and top logistics firms. Heirs returns from the dead, reclaims family empire. I let out a cold smile. They'll sign. Because if they don't, they won't just lose the company. They'll lose the last shred of reputation they still have. Maya nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of admiration and concern. Are you sure you won't go soft? I turned to the glass doors ahead, my reflection staring back at me. Sharp, ruthless, and terrifyingly clear. I already died once, Maya. And this time, I didn't come back to apologize. I had never believed in press conferences. I used to think they were nothing but performance stages for people who craved attention, people who loved flashbulbs and basked in the illusion of being the hero. But that morning, as I stood before the mirror, adjusting the collar of my navy blue suit, the traditional color of Morgan Freight, I realized something. Sometimes, the truth needs to be declared out loud, so no one can ever deny it again. The auditorium at Morgan Freight headquarters, now renamed Helix East HQ, was packed. Major media outlets were present: Bloomberg, CNBC, even the Wall Street Journal. They jostled for position, cameras raised, eyes gleaming with anticipation. The backdrop behind the stage had been replaced. No longer the dated Morgan crest. Now, the gleaming double helix logo of Helix Maritime, shining like the final punctuation mark on a dead legacy. At exactly 9 o'clock a.m. I stepped out from backstage. No more masks. No more dyed hair. No more hiding. Just me. Ellie Morgan. Alive. Visible. Undeniable. Camera shutters clicked like gunfire, flashbulbs burst against my skin. But I didn't blink. I stepped up to the podium, placed my hand on the mic. In the crowd I saw Emma, my sister, standing frozen, face full of confusion, eyes loaded with unanswered questions. Farther back my father stood among the board members, looking like a marble statue. Cold and crumbling from the inside. I spoke, my voice crisp and clear through the flawless audio system. Good morning. My name is Ellie Morgan. Some of you in this room once believed I was dead. But today, I stand here before all of you, alive, breathing, and stronger than ever. The front row fell silent. Someone dropped a pen on a table. It hit with a sharp click, like an exclamation point after my words. 6 years ago I left Morgan Freight because I refused an arranged marriage, a decision that didn't fit the family plan. The price I paid? Erasure. A fake funeral? An empty casket. A life deleted from the family records. I paused. Cameras flashed. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck, but I didn't let it distract me. At a return for revenge. I came back to save this company from a real death. The kind that comes slowly, from arrogance, stagnation, and gilded traditions paraded as virtues. I raised a document high, no longer telling a story, but delivering a sentence. Today, I officially announce: Morgan Freight has merged with Helix Maritime. The company will undergo complete restructuring. The Morgan name will remain. But the leadership, the vision, and the people behind it will never be the same. A tidal wave of murmurs swept through the room. Someone shouted, "Are you stealing your family's company?" I locked eyes with the voice. No. I'm saving it. From the very people who once decided I wasn't worthy of living, let alone leading. My eyes drifted to my father, his knuckles white against the armrest. He had the chance to keep the company. To keep me. But he chose the easier path, burying his daughter to protect his image. Today, I bury nothing. Today, I dig up the truth. I turn to face the board. All current board members will retire with full benefits, I said, voice steady. Oh, I don't need blood. I just need to make sure no other Ellie gets killed for refusing to obey. Emma stepped out of her row and walked closer, her eyes trembling. Sit. I stepped down from the stage and stopped in front of her. Do you really miss me, Emma? Or do you miss the version of me our parents created? Obedient, submissive, and always bowing her head. Emma didn't answer. A tear silently slid down her cheek. But this time, I didn't feel sympathy, only emptiness. I turned back to the mic. Starting today I will lead Helix and Morgan Freight. Not to preserve tradition, but to build a future where no one ever has to choose between legacy and their true self. Applause erupted, slow at first, then crashing like a tidal wave. Some clapped for the truth. Some for the power. But, regardless of why, I was no longer hiding behind the shadow of the Morgan name. I was Ellie. And now, I was the one leading. The press conference ended amid roaring applause, but I didn't stay for congratulations. I quietly slipped out back, where Maya was waiting with the car. We didn't speak on the drive home, but I could still hear the last question a reporter shouted before I stepped off stage. Ms. Ellie Morgan, what's next for you? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because for the first time in years, that question didn't weigh me down. For the first time, I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to fight to survive. I just needed to live, on my own terms. That night, I sat alone in my penthouse overlooking Charleston Bay. The city below looked like a moving painting. Streetlights bleeding into the water, distant sounds of a port that never sleeps. I poured a glass of red wine, opened my laptop, and replayed the morning's speech. Not out of pride, but because I wanted to remember that moment. The moment I was no longer defined by the name on my birth certificate. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number popped up. Sis? Can I see you, just the two of us? It's me, Emma. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes. Then replied with one line. Come, bring your real memories. Emma arrived an hour later. No longer the picture-perfect bride. No makeup, hair tied back, an oversized shirt and faded jeans. She looked more like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. We sat across from each other at the kitchen counter. I poured us water. No wine. No flowers. No masts. Emma spoke first, her voice shaking. I know. Everything you did, you had your reasons. You're stronger than anyone in this family ever believed. But I'm sorry for not standing by you. I was scared. I was weak. And I believed what they told me. I waited. Silent. I miss you, she said, clutching the glass. Not because you were on TV, or because you became CEO, but because I miss what it felt like to be your little sister. I miss when you taught me how to sneak extra marshmallows into our cocoa without getting caught. I miss the stories you used to tell about sailing into the ocean one day, all on your own. My eyes burned. It had been so long since I'd heard something real in Emma's voice. No pretense. No performance. Then this time? I said softly. Do you want to come aboard? Or stay on the shore? She paused. Then nodded. Slowly, but firmly. I want to go with you. Not for legacy. But because I want to know the real Ellie Morgan. Not the version they invented. I smiled. Not brightly, but for the first time in years. A genuine smile. Then we start tonight. Here there's no CEO. No Morgan name. Just two sisters. The next morning I walked Emma down to the lobby. Before the elevator doors closed, she turned and smiled gently. Sis, no matter what, I still think you were always meant to be Ellie. I didn't reply. I just waved. And as the doors closed, I turned and walked straight to the balcony. Outside, the first light of day spilled across the sea, sparkling like thousands of diamonds floating on the water. Ships bearing the Helix emblem were pulling into port. With every move, they carried hundreds of tons of cargo. And the dreams of thousands. And me. I set my coffee cup on the railing and picked up the phone. Maya, schedule a private meeting with the Westport development team. I want 2 new routes opened before year-end. Yes, CEO. Maya. Yeah. Call me Ellie. A pause. Welcome back, Ellie. I turned toward the wind, my hand gripping the compass pendant around my neck. My grandmother once said, "You don't need anyone to point the way. You just need the courage to walk it." Now, no one defines me. Not a name. Not a position. Not the weight of tradition. I died once to be reborn. I lost everything. And took it back with my own hands. I am Ellie Morgan. Not because they gave me the name, but because I chose to live by it. On my own terms. And this is only the beginning. Ellie's story is a powerful reminder that no one has the right to define your worth. Not even your family. When she was betrayed, erased and silenced, she chose the hardest path. To rise, rebuild from ashes, and become her strongest self. Ellie didn't seek revenge through hatred. She answered with success and absolute freedom. In a world where tradition can become a shackle, she proved that choosing your own path is choosing to truly live. What do you think about Ellie's choices? Was she too cold? Or was this the only way to live authentically? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come.